They do a wonderful job with that, and that's why I feel very good about them.
Just a hitchhike on that, I'm very pleased with how they've managed funds over difficult times. Mm-hmm. And I think the people that handle the money part of it have done exemplary work with managing funds in some pretty tough times, and still be able to take that money and share it in the community where we want it to go.
This is a second marriage for the two of us. We've been married for 40 years, almost 41. When we got married, well, Elwyn had lost his first wife to cancer, and he had 4 children. I was a divorced mother of 1. We got married. We met because we both worked at IBM in New York City, and we met and got married. Our kids, in fact, when we first started seeing each other, we did it with our children, and it was wonderful. Neither of us were really looking for another marriage at that time, right. But we did things on weekends with our children, and they got to really just be a part of it, and it evolved into a really wonderful marriage. And then since then we've had our own a child of our own, of course. And for a little while we had another child who needed a home for a while, and we had them in our family too, so we had a family for a while of 6 children, and it was his, hers, ours, and theirs. But
well, I've always felt very blessed to meet Elsie, and as she said, we started out by raking leaves and taking walks, and Kate gets fishing, and neither one of us was ready for anything serious. But I remember the kids were so excited when we did get engaged. Mm-hmm. They were so excited. They were all jumping up and down, and it's a great memory.
Yeah, it worked out.
I was conned to come over to work here for my uncle, Vernon Rosa. He was a great guy, my favorite uncle. Tough to work with, but what a brilliant person, and very giving, and particularly his wife Florence. They had done very well. He invented the fuel pump, diesel fuel pump that Standardine still makes. They've made probably 75, 80 million of them worldwide through franchises and so forth. But he was tough. He was a hard guy to work for, but it was sort of my way or highway. But a wonderful, giving person. Mm-hmm. At Easter Seal and church and community, and he just, and he loved the Hartford Foundation. He's really got us started in that direction, I guess.
And when we first came over too, you came over expecting to probably work with your uncle, but El was also concerned about that, because somebody can be a lot of fun at a party and family functions, but then to actually work with them, this might be a whole lot of a different story. So you were working for IBM at the time, right. And you took what they call an executive leave. IBM paid his salary for 1 year while he came up here to work for the Hartford Easter Seal Foundation. And so after that year is when you went in to work with him. But at the same time of going to the Hartford Easter Seal place, we had an incident in our family in that one of our boys had a very serious head injury. He had a motorbike accident, and he had traumatic brain injury. When we were moving up here, he had just come out of the hospital, and he was going to be going for outpatient therapy. So he went to the Hartford Easter Seal Rehab Center, and they did a wonderful job with him. Sure. He would leave the house in the morning, and he's a 25-year-old fellow now who had to learn to crawl and walk and feed himself. And he had gotten to the point where now he was learning to do a lot of things, occupational therapy kind of things. And he would get up in the morning and, I can't do it. He'd go to the Easter Seal, and he'd come home and say, I can do it. I can do anything. And I'm sure that's had an awful lot to do with how he was able to progress to the state he is now.
So we have a lot to thank, really, don't we, with the Easter Seal and people like that can help. So that's another thing where the money goes to situations like that people put people's lives back together in a way. He was my mother's brother. Okay. Grew up in Oliverville, New York, and never had a formal education. He left school in the 7th grade, and he went to a couple of trade schools, but he got involved with diesel engines during the Second World War, really, with they used that power generation in the field for military purposes. And in New York City, with other department stores were putting in elevators and things, and he was a very ingenious person. It was a funny story. When he grew up, he was a very prosperous for the time farm in Ulster County, and they had a tremendous herd of cattle that were worldwide known for their activities and so forth. But they developed tuberculosis, so the herd had to be shot one day. So he went from a very well-to-do family to a very destitute family, essentially in one day. And so he's always was concerned about that. He never had any formal education. Remember when he would be asked around the table, people get together, what's your name, where did you go to school, etc. He was so embarrassed with that he would always say he went to College of Hard Knocks. And that was his answer to that. But he never forgot being on the poor side of the tracks, really. And I think that helped him a great deal with his gift. Florence was a big driver of that. She was so good.
Florence,
She was so
yeah,
good.
really helped him along that line. Florence was a very giving person and very appreciative of what people would do for her or what she had, and she always wanted to share things. And I'm sure she was the catalyst behind him agreeing to, do this. And once he started, he enjoyed being able to give some of his money back to people.
Vernon Rosa founded a couple of chairs, one at Trinity and one at the University of Hartford, which are still there. We get invited to things for that in honor of him. They donated a great deal of money for some labs at Trinity, for instance, and subsequent monies for fundraising at the University of Hartford. So he was well liked and respected by both of those organizations. That was nice to have. But he was always very involved with education. He didn't want others to go through what he had to go through in his life. He wanted to see people graduate and do well in school. And Florence, of course, felt the same way.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
And Florence really liked to reach out to the underprivileged in the community. And so she really liked to see finances going to help them.
I remember one instance, just an example. They lost their older boy, and the younger boy needed some financial help for a while, and I was helping her. I was sort of their advisor of how to get some money to him. And I said, well, one thing we could do, we could put the money in a trust for, his name is David, I'm not sure you want to use names, but to help him for a while. So substantial income for 10 years went to him out of the trust. And then I suggested that after that trust was done, that it be turned over to Hartford Foundation, which it was. But that worked out well for everybody. The money went where she wanted to go, and I was thankful that I could make a suggestion about that. Well, the scholarship fund I'm quite familiar with. I've been up there several times to visit the people, and they select outstanding young people deserving of the funds for a scholarship basis. But again, that was Florence's idea. These were kids children that wouldn't be able to go to college or school probably without that help. And so often I use the term minority students that just really need a hand up kind of thing. And she was so pleased with that. She would personally go and see them at school and in their environment. And they'd write her little thank you notes and things, which she really loved. So that's sort of what I know about the scholarship fund at Talcott Mountain.
At Talcott Mountain, yeah. And those are children who, from Hartford, mostly, or the greater Hartford area anyway, who are in middle and high school. And these are children who it gives them a very special opportunity to get out of the inner city and be able to explore some of their own talents and interests. Yeah. And they seem to be doing very well.
They were gifted in every way but their environment. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a nice thing to do. The second fund that you asked about was, we talked about the one that came because of the funds for David. Mm-hmm. But the third one was, when she was getting on in years, we talked about where the money should go, and she was well, she supported her family very well, her son and family. And we talked a couple of times about where the balance might go. And I think I said, why don't we have an attorney over? But we did talk about Hartford Foundation because you had done such a great job with the first two funds that were there. So it was a split kind of thing. She had acknowledged her son and myself as being co-trustees after her passing away. And David and I sort of juggled where the funds would go each year. And it got to be a little bit one-sided. Money's going outside of this area. This is probably not something you put in the script. But I suggested, why don't we split it? And that's where the balance came in the Hartford Foundation, because that's where she asked that the money, the residual, go anyhow. I said, why don't we just step it up and make sure it's done right? And we've been blessed by being the donor advisors of that latter portion.
Well, for the most part, we try to follow what Florence was doing, and to keep up what she wanted to be doing. I know she would like to have it expanded too, so there are more than just the things that she was interested in. But we make sure that the funding gets to the particular organizations and functions that she was most interested in.
And we usually try to find her examples and guidelines when we do that. We've made no differentials from that pretty much, but I think she would be pleased with where the money goes.
Yeah.
Vernon Rosa was a great example of a person who had a tremendous ability and was always trying to help people. Difficult to work for, as we talked about, but that's true of many people that are brilliant in their field, whether it's an artist, a singer, an engineer, what have you. You think of the people in history that have done great things, and they've been sort of a one-way street. But thankfully, it worked out well, and he was a great example for people. And they still talk about it. He was listed as one of the top 100 inventors in Hartford, in Connecticut rather, some years ago, along with Eli Whitney and all. And the one thing I felt good about it, coming over to work for him, is that I was really able to have his good work acknowledged. He received several national awards for mechanical engineering societies and engineering societies, and got the Cole Award from General Motors, which is the highest award you can get in the country for an engineer. And really, I felt good about getting his name out there that wouldn't have perhaps been as well known without some help.
Yeah, for a man who never went farther than the 7th grade, and he had about 360 some patents to his credit, and he did just really, really well in his field. And then I think he and Florence were just a wonderful match, because while he was up there, superly immersed in his work, she was out there, now what can we do in the community and what can we do for other people?